Hospopreneurs. Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Today I'm joined by Alex Bell, who is designing a revolutionary way to age spirits. So, Alex, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're building at the moment?
Sure. So, in a nutshell, what I've developed is essentially a way to create a 21-year-old spirit inside of 7 days.
That is crazy.
So yeah, in a nutshell, like creating something that is genuinely old in a very short period of time.
Okay. I want to open that up, explore that way more. First though, what attracted you to hospitality? Actually, individually. So before I'm going to ask a bit more about you, but what attracts you to hospitality?
Honestly, I love having a good time. So I started really getting into, I started delving into the world of spirits. So I started off, I was overseas in Burma and just decided to just try some cocktails.
Mm-hmm.
Saw like James Bond drinking them. I was like, I'm going to be classy as shit.
Shake and not stir.
Exactly. I've definitely used that one before. So I just started trying cocktails, and then I proceeded into doing a course at university. And so it was an engineering course, and I wasn't understanding the concepts behind the course.
So what was that course? Is that course relevant to what you did learn, and it sort of pushed you in this direction as well? What was that course sort of about?
So the course code or the course name was Unit Operations.
Because you're a student at UQ?
Yeah. So I'm currently completing my chemical engineering undergraduate here at UQ. And there were just some key concepts I wasn't understanding in the course. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this?
We all have that feeling, at times.
I have that feeling way too often, though. That's my problem. So I just decided to delve more into it and go into the practical applications of what I was learning. And I found out...
Which we also need.
Yeah, we also
University needs that.
We need those practical application doers, as they call them nowadays. But, so I had a look, and essentially the process is called distillation, and that's the process of creating a spirit. So you start off with, say, like an unhopped beer, and then you distill that and you turn it into whiskey. And so I learnt all this, and I thought...
Did you say an unhopped beer?
Yeah.
You can turn beer into whiskey.
Yeah, so...
I want to spell it out for all levels of knowledge in the program as well. So
cool. So just like going off on a little tangent, when you create like any grain type spirit, you actually start off making beer.
Right.
So you malt your grain, you extract the starches out of it. You then ferment those starches, and then and this is where beer and whiskey or grain spirit making diverge. Beer, you then proceed to boil it with hops, and boil it with hops prior to fermentation. But with making grain whiskey and that sort of thing, you don't add hops, and you just go straight to the fermentation, then distill that product.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good. Thanks for that. That's good to explain it to people who don't know as well. Sure. There will be some listeners who are very clued up on that sort of thing. But that's awesome. So thanks for that, Alex. So you're talking about university. You're learning it. You want your practical application. You wanted to learn more, and so you're reading into that. Yeah. So I
was reading into it. Wasn't understanding it, and then one of the processes, distillation. I was like, okay, well, you can actually make your own alcohol with this. This will be a good idea. So, So I was like,
every uni student gets excited about his home, a home brew.
Homebrew setup. I'm like, I could definitely get into this. And so I did. So I started off making...
your moonshine.
Yes, the very first batch was moonshine. It was awful.
And you didn't go blind. That's good.
I tried.
You wear glasses though.
I do wear glasses, and I did try to severely injure myself that night.
Was that prior or post consumption of your moonshine?
That was post consumption. Okay. Yeah, I was like, this probably needs to be cleaned up quite significantly. So then I really hit the books, and then I really started getting into what actually makes a good spirit.
Awesome.
And then went right into the technical detail about still designs, fermentation, methods and equipment, yeast, bacteria, strains. Just, went right into the science.
Awesome. So you're seeing that application of what you're learning.
Yeah, exactly. And then stuff really started to make sense.
Cool.
I'm one of those practical-minded people that I don't understand something unless I can hold it and manipulate it with my own hands.
Yeah, right.
A bit of a Neanderthal with respect to that.
I think a lot of people are. A lot of people are very tactile. They like to do things to learn.
Yeah.
In hospitality, in business, we meet a lot of these people in startup circles or through hospitality who, I know a lot of people who've gone into hospitality who went, look, the office life isn't for me. I'd rather be more physical with what I do, and they go into sometimes in hospitality, other areas as well.
Yeah,
really cool. I mean, someone like me, coming from a business background, studying finance, and then going, look, I'd rather be dealing with people all day, every day, all night, every night. That's my thing. So it's good to learn that, and you know that about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's a valuable lesson, knowing how you learn.
Totally. So the next thing I wanted to bring up was, so you've sort of gone through the process of building that, or how you age, or how you actually create the spirit.
Yeah.
So some of our listeners may be familiar with how to age it, but how do you go from creating something that takes 21 years to 7 days? How do you what is it that happens?
Yeah. So just as a bit of background, I am going to use a bit of science here. Going to keep it as simple.
That's cool.
As possible.
So if we get a little bit scientific, that's cool. There might be some people who want to learn more about the science as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So through my research as to trying to make a really good spirit at home, essentially a good spirit's made in the barrel. So you've got your white spirits and whatnot there. They are technically aged, but then they're carbon filtered, so it takes out a lot of the flavour, so you get a very clean, very neutral spirit. But if you want, say, a really nice Jamaican rum, it has to be aged in a barrel for a dark rum, so it has to be aged for a minimum of 5 years, to make it smoother. Now that process of making it smoother, what that is doing is it's combining two elements together. So during the fermentation process, you're trying to create alcohol, so ethyl alcohol.
Can you describe fermentation a little bit more?
Cool. So fermentation is just the digestion of starches and fermentable products into alcohol, via yeast.
Cool.
So yeast they want to survive, and the way that they survive in an anaerobic, so using another term, without oxygen, they survive in an anaerobic environment, thank you, is they actually produce ethanol.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and then we can drink that and we can have a good time. But then the other process that also happens is the creation of acids. So the yeast also create acids as well, but in much smaller quantities, and they also produce other things called congeners that contribute to flavour. But bacteria contamination is also another big thing that happens in spirits.
Okay.
So the bacteria that is native to the area produces acids, so it produces ethyl acid, like acetic acid, butyric acid, isovaleric, those kinds of organic acids. It creates those. Now, in the barrel itself, what happens is that those organic acids and the ethanol react.
Okay.
And they form flavour compounds called esters.
And so were those, you said that bacteria, is that bacteria dangerous?
No.
No. Yeah?
So, although it does depend on what bacteria it is, but generally speaking, like 99.999% of all bacteria is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't harm you. But the bacteria that is normally present in fermentations is fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks for that. So before I distracted you with the fermentation thread, you were talking about the process and talking a little bit more about the actual aging process.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the aging process itself is essentially a chemical reaction. So it's the combination, or it's the reaction between acids and alcohols to form esters. And these esters are what gives a spirit its flavour. Mm-hmm. So there's also another thing that's happening at the same time. The wood of the barrel itself is actually degrading. Mm-hmm. So over time, you'll notice that if you put a plank of, or say your outdoor table, if it's made of wood, you have to keep putting oil on it.
Yep.
Oil or varnish on it to stop the sunlight from making it go white, essentially.
Is that just the sunlight that does that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the light actually changing the chemical composition of the wood.
Does all light do that? So
pretty much. Yeah.
So does that mean that, say, in a distillery, that they have to keep them in the dark?
Right. So the reason why they keep them in the dark is more of a function of temperature.
Okay.
So in your downage warehouses in Scotland, it's a very constant temperature. Mm-hmm. So the temperature range only varies by about 5, maybe 10 degrees in summer.
And is that because the wood expands and contracts in the
wood does
fluctuation of temperature?
So the wood does expand and contract to some extent, but there's also another thing going on, and that's the spirit expanding and contracting into and out of the wall of the barrel.
Yeah.
So when it's colder, things tend to become more dense, so their volume decreases, and things, when they get hot, they tend to expand.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. So there's two things going on there. But
sounds like a lot more. Sounds like a lot more than two. But in the barrel.
It very simple.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
We can go scientific as well.
The science comes into it with all the chemical reactions that occur. Mm-hmm. I don't know all the chemical reactions. I'm not that clever. But what I do is set up the environment that facilitates those reactions a lot faster.
Cool.
So, so as I said, you've got two things going on. You've got esters being formed, and you've got wood degrading over time. Mm-hmm. So the process which I've developed essentially is a time machine for spirits.
Yeah.
So it literally exactly.
Yeah.
So it just speeds up the reaction.
Yeah.
Between the acids and the alcohols, and it degrades the wood faster.
Okay. So
generally speaking, you use oak, American or French oak.
And I've also heard, so people talk about American and French oak. I watched a documentary recently. They were saying that they're also in different sizes.
Yeah.
Is that something different? Is the French oak smaller?
No. So the French oak is
the barrel sizes.
No. So the barrel sizes are like your quarter cask, half casks.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Hogsheads then.
And I've heard different things about that, being that with a larger cask, there's a higher liquid volume to the, basically there's
the surface area to volume ratio is smaller.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Thanks for the math.
No, you're right.
The science there. So
exactly.
That's obviously an argument for or against different things happening, flavors. What sort of happens?
Sort of. So what is happening there is oak influence. Mm-hmm. So if you want a strong oak influence, then you'll use a smaller barrel. But you also have to weigh up costs as well, because smaller barrel are generally not that much cheaper than, say, a big barrel, because there's a lot more workmanship that goes into or rather it's the same workmanship, less material, but same workmanship going into a smaller barrel. So it ends up costing, pretty much the same.
Is it actually less material?
Yeah. Yeah, so like if you've got a 25 litre barrel, 25 litre barrel is...
well, not one barrel compared to another barrel, but say to hold the same volume of liquid, would it require less material to build that?
Oh, right. So on a barrel per barrel basis, a smaller barrel has less material, but if you're making like 6 barrels to equal one big barrel, then yes, it uses more material that way. But if you have a smaller barrel, you end up with more oak influence. That may be desirable. It may not be desirable, and it also depends on the age of the oak as well, because older oak is far more dense. So when you've got oak trees that are like 800,000 years old, the wood is very, very, very dense.
Right.
So you get less evaporation, and you actually get more cast contributing to the flavour.
Right.
Whereas
woody flavours into the
drink. So specifically it's the tannins in the wood. So over time the lignin degrades into
what was that? Lignin?
Lignin. So it's a component of wood. So you've got a couple of different components, main ones being lignin and cellulose. Okay, yep. So the lignin contributes to your vanilla flavours.
I like that one.
Yeah. It goes really well in rum. So it contributes to those flavours. But depending on what type of wood you get as well, because you get a different flavours from the barrel. So your American oak, you get your strong vanilla, nutmeg flavours. From your French oak, you get pepper, nutmeg, and then some other really, really nice flavours.
There was another thing that I thought of there, being that people also mention, the charred oak barrels versus new oak. They're like ex-bourbon barrels that they age other things in. What can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it depends on regulations in the country. So American bourbon is required to be in brand new oak, and it's required to be aged for a minimum of 3 years, I believe.
Why is that? Was there does it cause problems, or why is it regulated to do that?
It's just a rule. Like absinthe was, outlawed for.
Could there be some sort of? Yeah. Could there be some sort of risk, like health risk?
No,
none.
Just
for the wood industry.
Well, we've actually got an interesting dynamic. So right now we've actually got a shortage of barrels for Scotch whisky.
Oh, okay.
Due to the popular demand of Scotch from around the world, and
very popular. I know they've been removing the age statements. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're trying to pump it out as fast as possible.
Yeah. So an age statement is just where they say on the bottle, how old it is.
Yeah. So the minimum spirit that went into this bottle was a minimum of 21 years old. If it's a 21-year-old, so that means that the youngest spirit in that 21-year-old is 21 years old. But it could have like 100-year-old whiskey in there as well. So
okay, cool. They have to say the youngest.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So one thing I want to clarify for the list for you listeners out there is you talk about, so Alex or people talk about the process. Does the same business do the whole thing, or are there there are bottlers, there are distilleries? How does that work? Can you tell us a bit more about where it can diverge, and there's different companies distributing, and so basically what the chain of events is that occurs from having a grain to turning that grain into something that someone gets in their glass?
Sure. So again, it depends on the size of the distillery. If we just take a craft distillery, say in Tasmania, so what generally so I went down there, had a look around. One of the craft distilleries I went to, the owner actually grows all of his own grain. So he's a farmer first who grows rye.
Mm.
And then he just decided to put in a still. It's like,
there you go.
This would be a good idea. So he actually does it from scratch. So what he does is he goes out, cultivates his field, then proceeds to collect the grain from his fields, and then he malts it. So that process of malting is essentially wetting the grain just enough for it to think that it's going to grow into more grass, into more ryegrass.
Mm-hmm.
So
tricking the chemistry of it.
Exactly. Well, it's actually more biology. So there's enzymes within each of the seeds that are released when they hit a certain moisture temperature, and they convert the hard to digest carbohydrates into carbohydrates that the yeast can actually consume. So your really simple carbohydrates, so your glucose, fructose, sucrose, even maltose as well.
Because there are lots of types of
sugars. Yeah, very much so. So you go through the malting process. You then go through a drying process. Now, this drying process also depends on whether you want a peated whiskey or a non-peated whiskey. So with a peated whiskey, you dry the grain using peat. So it's essentially young coal, if you want to think of it like that. So it's not as dense as coal, but it's still black. It's still quite... it's quite hard.
Is it in the coal family?
Yeah. So peat gets transformed into coal over millions of years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so it almost is exactly coal.
It is young coal.
It is young coal, cool.
Yeah. So they dry it using that, and that act of burning the peat releases the very smoky flavours that you get in your Kalilas and your Isla malts. On the other hand, you can just sun dry and then just let it air dry, or let the malt air dry. Then what you do is you then put that into a mashing tun. So it's called a mash tun, where they literally just add water and just take a paddle to it and swirl it around for days and days and days and days and days. Then what happens is they extract the liquid from that, and then they put that into their fermenters, and then they add yeast to it. A lot of distilleries just use a dry yeast that you can pick up from any commercial dry yeast provider. So in doing that, you end up with essentially an unhopped beer. So after it's gone through its fermentation period, depends on what kind of profile you're after. If you're after a very fruity kind of profile, then you leave it fermenting for longer. So you make sure that you get all of the digestible carbohydrates turned into ethanol or into flavour compounds like esters and congeners and that.
So these are the sorts of questions that someone, if they like a particular kind of whiskey, they can ask someone at a whiskey bar who knows about these sorts of things, which bottles, contain that sort of whiskey.
And it strikes up a great conversation.
Yeah, for people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, the bartenders just love going, have you just tried this?
They do. This one's particularly, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So then after the fermentation period of between 3 days to even up to 2 weeks, 3 weeks if you want a really heavy run, but for whiskey, 3 days to 2 weeks. Excuse me. And then what you do is you put that into your still. So still design, this is a really big topic, but essentially what you're trying to do is...
We'll go into another episode,
So what you're trying to do is separate the alcohol from water. So you've essentially got this ethanol water mixture and you're trying to concentrate the ethanol. So you essentially boil it, let the vapors go up, and then you condense them back down. and then you end up with a slightly more concentrated solution of alcohol and water.
Mm-hmm.
That's still fairly undrinkable at this stage. So then what you do is you separate it again.
Mm-hmm.
So you just run it through the still, boil it again, recondense it, back down into your spirit, and then you make cuts along the way.
So I've heard that basically that like there's like the first 10% is the stuff that makes you go blind, or and how do you measure that?
Again, it depends. So if you're using a pot still, just a general pot still, the first minimum, the first 1% of the entire batch you've just made. So if you made a 100-litre batch, then you take off the first litre, the first 700 mils to a litre out of your final cup. So that just goes away. Reason being is because it's got another alcohol in it called methanol. And that stuff you could drink, but it will make you go blind, or it could kill you.
There we go. So don't drink that.
Yes. No.
Don't do that. Anyone at home. No. Don't drink that stuff.
No. So if you're going to buy a still, just take the first 100 ml off every time.
Awesome. Thank you for the tips. Whiskey is massive topic, and Absolutely. I will explore it in future episodes with other people who are maybe whiskey bartenders or distillers, or maybe I'll get a master distiller on one day. That'd be lovely. So I want to get further into what you're doing with it. So we don't have much longer, but what you're actually doing, and then sort of exploring that just a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So after you've made your cuts in your still and you've got your final spirit product, you then put that into a barrel. So in the barrel, it reacts and does its thing, and you just keep the barrel in a nice place, forget about it for 12 years, and then you come back and you're like, oh, that's really nice.
Turns out it's good.
Yeah.
Whoever came up with that first. I mean, they were obviously, I don't know, they're just like, I wonder what that tastes like.
Yeah, exactly. So
it makes me feel happy.
Yeah.
It's just like, they come up with that.
Oh, it's amazing.
Someone was game enough to drink it.
Yeah, I know. It takes a long time. What I do, as I just said, I just speed that process up. So rather than taking 12 years,
using special techniques.
So essentially, yes, it's black magic.
How much can you tell us? As much as you can. I understand you've got IP and whatnot.
Yeah,
but that's what I'm really excited to hear about.
So the two processes that go on are the reaction between the alcohol and the acids to form esters, and the degradation of the wood. So the processes that I employ are trying to facilitate those reactions faster. So I can't delve too much more into it, but essentially it's a function of temperature for the formation of esters. So the process is called esterification, where and it's been around for 120 years now. Like, it's a very well-known chemical principle for making esters in a laboratory. So all I did was I just took that research and then just applied it to aging spirit in a barrel.
Through your sort of expansion of your knowledge in this course, learning about that, you're like, oh, I can do that.
So the course was just the catalyst for doing all this. All this research has been about 3.5 years in total, reading, watching YouTube. Many hours were spent on YouTube.
Some American Southerners like.
I
drink the first 100 mils.
I stay right away from those people. They generally have no idea what they're talking about. Because some of the forums when I was doing my research, having a look at spirit making, it was just like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're just confusing people.
So for you, it's you're interested in the guys with the test tubes.
Yeah, I'm interested. Studying chemical engineering gives you a grounding in first principles. So that essentially just means, well, what are the base? What's the base story going on here? So we use tools to explain phenomena at a bigger scale. Mm-hmm. So I use the esterification principle and then just applied it to another thing, say aging spirits in a barrel. Mm. So essentially the engineering degree gives you some really good tools and a framework for thinking through problems.
Great. Yeah, cool. Nice pitch for the engineering degree as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So where's your business at? What sort of stage are you at? What are you, are you looking for anything? Are you looking for, have you got funding? Where are you at now?
I'm so...
do you have a name for it? What's
Yeah, sure. So Alchemy Spirit Company.
Alchemy Spirit Company.
Yep. alchemyspiritcompany.com. Have a look online. It goes through a bit more into who I'm trying to help, why I'm trying to do this, and how I expect to do it.
I'll put that link in the description as well, by the way. Yeah.
So where I'm at the moment is basically cold calling as many distilleries in Australia as possible. Mm-hmm. So I have plans on taking this overseas, but Australia has really interesting regulations with respect to spirits, which allow this process to be employed straight away. Mm. Whereas in Scotland, this process is technically not really allowed.
Okay.
Because it breaches Scotch Whisky Association guidelines for what you can actually call.
Oh, so it wouldn't be called whiskey?
It couldn't be called a Scotch whisky.
Ah, but it's still called whiskey.
But it's a whisky from Scotland.
True.
It's not a Scotch whisky, but it's a whisky from Scotland.
It would be a Scotch, non-Scotch whiskey.
You're really splitting hairs with this one, but it's those those distinctions that allow you to be able to sell it or not. Mm.
Okay, cool.
Me. Yeah, so I'm at the moment just calling up a whole heap of distilleries saying, hey, look, got this great new technology, can really help you out, whatnot.
And so can you give this to any bars, if there are any bars around who want it, or?
Yeah, for sure.
For them to try it, maybe they want to give it a go.
Oh, I've definitely
and how do they get in contact? Through your website as well?
Yeah, through my website, everything's on there. Mm-hmm. So they can absolutely try it out. I've got quite a bit of product at home that I'm more than willing to give samples of. But at the moment, I've been looking at craft distilleries in Australia as those foundational customers.
Cool.
But there's nothing stopping a bar from ordering, scaled down version of it and aging their own, cheaper spirit in the process, and then having that as their house, sort of Scotch or house.
Yeah,
whatever.
Great.
Yeah.
So you can age their stuff for them. Do it. I suppose you could age something far more quickly for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can turn like a Bacardi 5-year-old into a Bacardi 21-year-old.
Bacardi 100-year-old in a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So people could have whiskey at an age that they've never tasted before, potentially.
So potentially.
Could that be a way for even people who are interested to know, even distilleries to know, what's our whiskey going to taste like in 100 years?
Absolutely. 100%.
That's great.
Yeah. So not only do you get to have, like, say, a snapshot, because using a mass spectrometer, so that gives you a definite gauge on what congeners are actually in the final spirit. Mm-hmm. Using this process, it's the identical spirit.
Identical.
It's the identical spirit.
Mm.
So it's the same spirit. It's just been produced far faster than the other one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Cool. Well, look, I do want to wrap up the episode.
For sure.
And thank you very much for your insights today, Alex. I will I'll post that link in the description of the episode. The last question I want to quickly ask you is, what's your number one resource been in your journey?
That's really hard. There's not one, because it depends on the context. Mm-hmm. Business context. I'm really loving the startup community in Brisbane. because they just pool all the resources into one convenient spot.
Mm-hmm.
For looking at aging a spirit, combination of university chemistry and like anecdotal reports on forums.
Which forums? What sorts?
Artisan Distiller. They're not bad. But again, it's a lot of I don't want to say rednecks, but rednecks just not really knowing what they're doing. The beer forums are a lot better because you've actually got biological scientists in there, moderating the forums, but you don't have any like engineers in the spirit forums that have a deep enough understanding of it. So you really have to go digging and connect seemingly unrelated dots together.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because for the research, I went into biofuels making. To find principles. It's
You didn't learn how to make any bombs in the process or anything.
No.
Is you'd be on a blacklist very quickly if you look for that.
Oh no. Absolutely not. But I mean, that's the breadth of of the research that had to go into like creating this process. Had to look at unrelated industries that just research that's really only just come out too, in the last 5 years.
Awesome. So you're on the forefront of something big.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a big industry, absolutely.
Well, my fingers are crossed for you. Thanks for coming in, having a chat. Thank you for sharing everything with our listeners, and looking forward to catching up with you next time. If, guys, for you listening at home, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, email me if you have any questions, concerns, anything you'd like to hear on the episodes coming in the future. This is only the second episode, so there'll be plenty more to come. You can email me at hospopreneurs@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much, and have a good night. Cheers.